Yo, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? So, bit of a different video today, right? I'm not going to be doing any playing. I just kind of wanted to talk to you guys about some decks that I'm working on right now, and I really just want your guys' thoughts on them because you guys know me. I'm not into playing meta decks all the time, right? Especially when it comes to just enjoying the overall game. I want to play some cards that don't really see a lot of love all the time, and number one right now is Toedscool EX. I hardly see this on the ladder, and it's crazy to me because it's attack colony rush, right? When you combine it with the new Lilligant that we got from Journey Together, you're doing close to 400, actually a little over 400 damage to your opponent's bench Pokemon when you have 8 Pokemon in play, all with grass energy. It's a really, really fun deck. Now, granted, the one thing about it that sucks is its Cornerstone Ogerpon matchup is not spectacular. There are cards that you can put in. There is a Teal Dance Ogerpon, a Teal Mask Ogerpon that you can put in that does have an attack that costs 2 energy, and it basically does 20 damage per your opponent's benched Pokemon. So it is super effective against Cornerstone Ogerpon. Doesn't have an ability. It's really strong. But I also realize, you can throw MUEX in there and you can actually just, keep hitting Cornerstone Ogerpon. It does kind of the same deal because this deck does run for Energy Switch, and it's very interesting, man. It's just a really, really fun deck, and it was probably one of my favorite decks to run when Charizard was really popular because it's super effective against Charizard, and right now the only other thing that it's super effective against in our current meta is Zoroark EX, which, granted, Zoroark's pretty popular too, so it's been a lot of fun. But in general, I'm just struggling to find scenarios in which to use this deck because it is a lot of fun, and I am trying to find excuses to use the Lilligant and the Magmortar from Journey Together because they have great abilities, right? Between the Sunny Day allowing you to do 20 more damage with your grass Pokemon, and then Magmortar that's putting 3 more damage counters on your opponent's active burn Pokemon. I just think is super unique, but in general this list isn't crazy. They are running it with Blissey EX right now, but I just think that this is a pretty solid deck, and I wish it was more meta, but I want your guys' thoughts. What can we do to make this more super effective against the Dragapult matchup, right? Because the Dragapult matchup, once we get Toedscool set up and we do get the Area 0 Underdepths in play, yeah, we are doing 320 damage relatively easy, right? But then they start blowing up our Lilligants with Dust Noirs, and they start evening out the prize trade, and it just gets so difficult to play the game at that point. And then when you have all your energy in play, it's hard to run the Teal Dances and stack energy and attack and not run into that fateful unfair stamp play or Iono play to shrink your hand size. But anyway, so we did just talk about Toedscool. The one other deck that I'm running right now, it's my active deck, is Okidogi EX, and that's just because I love Okidogi. I love the fact that this thing just bodies Cornerstone Ogerpon, especially with Chain Craze attack. When it's poisoned, this attack does 130 more damage on top of the initial 130 damage. So it does 260 damage total. Then with a Binding Mochi attached, it does 300 damage, right? So what I've been trying to do with this deck is I've been trying to combine it with Munkidori to hit those 320 and 330 numbers against Dragapult and Charizard. But what I've been struggling with is I need to attach a Binding Mochi, right? I can't attach a Bravery Charm or a Hero Escape because then we are falling short of that damage. Now, the only other thing that I can think of to do is put, a Perilous Jungle into play and then put a Brute Bonnet with an Ancient Booster Capsule attached, but I just don't know what'll be best for this deck, right? I really want Okidogi to work, but the only problem is the Dragapult matchup is abysmal right now because at 250 HP, right? Once you poison your Okidogi, if you don't get the attack off that turn, that 10 damage that then brings it to 240, oh, dude, it's miserable because then all they got to do is evolve into Dusclops, and then they pop the Dusclops on your Okidogi, brings it to 190 HP, then they Phantom Dive you for 200, and Okidogi's knocked out before you even get the chance to attack a Dragapult EX or move any damage off with Munkidori. And now I know you guys see the random Darkrai here, and the Darkrai is solely just to deal with Mimikyu, right? There are other cards that we can play. We can put like the Baby Roaring Moon in this deck, and we can attach 2 Dark Energy and do 70 damage and knock it out, right? But I just think the Darkrai is a lot more fun, Does it make as much sense? Not really. But Night Cyclone, you move all the energy from this Pokemon to your bench Pokemon in any way you like. So if you do use Janine's Secret Art to accelerate energy to it, Then after you attack, you can just go ahead and move all that energy off, and you can put it back onto your Okidogis. But the cool thing about this deck is that it does utilize Zoroark EX as a draw engine too, and an attacker, right? So that's the other thing, is how can we put these two cards together in order to create a deck that, one, doesn't get bodied by Dragapult, which, I mean, I think I would need to introduce a Darmanitan or a Darumaka and then use Okidogi as a late game attacker, right? I think that might be kind of the answer, but you know, again, we've been substituting the Roaring Moon EX as well for Frenzied Gouging to take out, you know, the Dragapults, the Mamoswines, the Charizards that we can't otherwise handle with Okidogi. But yeah, I want to know your guys' thoughts on this. And again, I'm going to put the deck list for each of these decks in the description, but I just want to know your guys' initial thoughts, because the next deck that I want to talk about is Scizor EX. And that is solely because I had a ton of fun playing this deck yesterday, because I just literally put this baby Scizor in the active for punishing Scissor's attack, and it just bodied Raging Bolt, right? And this was Raging Bolt that was running the Noctowl engine, and it does 50 more damage for each of your opponent's Pokemon play that has an ability, right? So you're looking at 2 Noctowls on the bench, 2 Teal Mask Ogerpons, and then, you know, if they have the Latios for free retreat, right, you're doing 250 or 260 damage, right? So you are knocking out the Raging Bolts, and if they have something else with an ability, you know, then you can do a little bit more damage. But I just had so much fun with this. Now, the problem is Scizor EX, right? It does have 2 pretty good attacks, but Crossbreaker, it only does a max of 240 damage. And then you have to discard that energy anyway, right? Now, discarding it's no big deal because we can re-accelerate it with Blaziken EX in the Seething Spirit ability, right? So it's not a super big deal, but that 270 HP, again, is another rough number to hit, because if you are playing against Dragapult, they are doing the 200 damage. They can manipulate even more damage if they are playing a Munkidori or a Duskull. So it just feels like in order to play Scizor EX, you have to attack with Steel Wing first. That does 70 damage, and then you take 50 less damage from attacks, right? Now, this deck I haven't played a whole heck of a lot, right? I do want to use Zoroark as the draw engine. I tried Revavroom, but Revavroom felt far too clunky. I was playing 8 energy with it, and I just felt like I couldn't get the energy every time. But now the Cyrano, right? Dude, this supporter is seeing so much play right now, and for good reason. A lot of these stage 1 decks really need Cyrano to operate, you know, especially with just trying to find Zoroark EX, draw into an attack. It just works really well. It's like a much better version of Jacques. And honestly, I don't use Jacques a whole heck of a lot right now because I can use Cyrano in these stage 1 decks. But yeah, this is another one that I want to know your guys' initial thoughts on, because again, the idea is to attack with Scizor EX, and because it is a stage 1 Pokemon, you know, we can start attacking with it relatively quickly because it only has 2 energy costs, and its first attack does an initial 70 damage, right? And it can attack against Cornerstone Ogerpon. So 70 damage is great because it's knocking out the Fan Rotoms, the Budews. It's not knocking out Mimikyu, right, because it is an EX Pokemon. But this is another deck that I'm thinking of, what draw engine do I want to put? Should I go back to the River Room and run a higher count of energy, right? Make it a little bit easier to find what we need? Or would it be beneficial for me to put, you know, a Pidgeot in the deck instead and, you know, maybe cut the Blaziken? But again, it just comes down to you have to discard energy, and then you're doing 240 damage. And that is just such a bad, it's not a bad number to hit, right? But it's not 270, it's not 280, you know, where you're knocking out all the evolutions or you're knocking out the Zoroark. So yeah, this is another deck that I really want to have fun with, but I'm just getting bodied on the ladder. But again, shout out to the stage 1 Scizor, not the EX, that has this very wonderful first attack, and you guys have been seeing it in Goldango. But yeah, and last but not least is just Zoroark EX and Charizard EX. This is one of those decks that I think has a lot of potential, but the problem is, how do you deal with the wall matchups? How do you deal with, you know, going up against Milotic EX, right? You can deal with it with Zoroark EX, especially once they put damage on you, but Mimikyu, right? We don't have a way of dealing with Mimikyu with this deck. You can use Charmeleon, you know, if you want, but yeah, this deck is just clunky, man. I do like the Heroescape play, but using Charizard EX as an endgame attacker, brilliant. And now I have played a couple of games with this deck, and as far as how Zoroark deals with Dragapult EX, dude, it's just so good to see that this combined with Darmanitan, you just do 90 damage to the active, 90 damage to the Dracloak on the bench, and it doesn't like really disrupt Dragapult, but depending on how their setup is, sometimes you get really lucky and they only get 2 Dreepies in play. You know, you can get a little boss up on the other Dreepy and take it out. But yeah, man, I mean, as far as decks go, I think I have built this far too clunky for it to operate, you know, at peak efficiency every time. I'm debating on putting more Brock Scouting in, like substituting one Arven for another Brock Scouting. That way I can get more basics in play. But it just really depends. And again, I'm going to post this down below. But if you guys have given any of these deck lists any thoughts, I want to know what you guys think, because these are decks that I really want to use more often, especially the Okidogi. I just feel like that one's a glass cannon right now. Zoroark, Charizard. I might be running too many Pokemon. I might need to go down to like a 2-2 line of Zoroark and Zoroark, right? Might make it function a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, if I could just combine this Scizor with the Okidogi, I think that'd be great too. You know, again, I'm addicted to this one card that does 50 damage per ability, or Pokemon with an ability in play. But yeah, and if you guys haven't played Toedscool, definitely another deck that y'all need to check out, because it's just unbelievable, man. I mean, that ability is superior, and there are ways that we can deal, you know, with the wall matchup, because we do just one-hit KO Milotic, and then when you throw this Toedscruel in play that has the Slime Mold Colony ability, dude, woo! Sometimes that just wins you the game, especially against Goldango. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, if you did enjoy the video, please let me know. But this is more of like a, I want your guys' help kind of deal, right? I'm not the best at building decks, and it would just be really good to get your guys' opinion and see what you think. Maybe we've laid the foundation for you guys to come in and, you know, say, oh, well, this is what you need for Okidogi, or this is what you need for Zoroark and Charizard, right? But, you know, I might end up making some videos about how these decks are playing in the future, but, I mean, as of right now, dude, I'm just getting curb stomped, man. So, but yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I wish you guys a very, very wonderful night, and don't forget, have a very, very wonderful day. Peace.